Skateboarding is a sport that has a lot of art and culture infused into it. So it's weird that so many skateboarding games have a lot of dull shades in them. They're typically characterised by lots of neutral bits of the colour palette. Because they're all based in cities, and cities are full of rats, and those people with clipboards, and also the colour grey. Enter OlliOlli World, a game with a different tip to most realistic takes on the sport. The visuals are immediately striking. It's not subtle, there's a clashing mash of pastels, and also there's no one with any clipboards. And this game feels immediately different from the big headline skateboarding titles that we know. And I don't know if you've ever tried to say clashing mash of pastels before, but I did that first take, so probably going to be running this website soon. Obviously, with this level of creativity, it'd be weird if you couldn't customise your sidewalk surfer. And you can! Customizable characters, what will they think of next? And it's not stingy either. You're expecting the usual stuff like, different hats, hoodies, shorts, boards, that kind of thing. But you can actually make your people green, orange. It's like an episode of Doug, if you remember that. You probably don't. It's like an old kids TV show. The characters are like green and blue. I don't know, Google it. The point is, even before you've unlocked stuff, there's a lot of stuff to choose from. And if any of your friends have the game, then your little skater will show up on their loading screens, which is brilliant. So I first played OlliOlli back when Switch Stance came out on the Switch, good pun, back in 2019. And this feels like a really big play for like the mainstream of sports video games. Because whereas the original had some character and you could grind roller coasters and stuff, essentially there wasn't a lot of personality to it really, and this feels like they're aiming for a much more memorable experience. So speaking of personality, you have your little crew of skaters that you meet. My favourite is Gnarly Mike. He looks like what maybe Rag and Bone Man would look like if he made punk instead of whatever it is that he does. And I also like Rad Dad, who's the kind of older member of the team who is just harangued for being old really by the younger people in the crew. Must be how Andy feels here at NGB. So the main one in the skate crew really is Chiffon. She is the current reigning skate wizard of Radlandia, which is where all the skating happens. And it's sort of your goal to take over her job, which is a good motivation because she's got this kind of third eye hippie shtick, and it's all very gap year student. She spent 5 days in India and thinks she's the Buddha. The whole thing is very Gen Z. Someone describes a tree as thick at one point. That's thick with 2 C's. So that's a good indicator of what you're getting into. But the game isn't just likeable characters and trees with back. This is the more accessible experience than before. And many challenges that would have been essential to clear a level back on Switch Dance are now optional side quests. And all you really have to do to get to the next level is just to get to the end of the current level. Nor do you have to stick the landing so perfectly anymore by hitting the button at exactly the right point. You can just ride it out, but if you do hit that perfect landing, you are rewarded with points and extra speed, as is the way. So speaking of tricks, obviously the game eases you in pretty nicely. There's some basic ollie tutorialing, as I would, to begin with, before you move on to your standard kick flips, your heel flips, your shove its, the type. And in theory these are all kind of easy. Flip tricks, grinds and wall rides, they're all triggered by flicks of the left stick, while grabs all live on the right stick. I think this is a pretty neat way of doing it because you don't have to remember any sort of trailing combos to do anything. You can just flick the stick around and see what happens. It's only if you get hardcore and want to hit all of Gnarly Mike's little side quests that you need to worry about what you're actually doing. But where will you be doing these side quests and tricks and flicks of your stick? Well, visually, OlliOlli World it's kind of like someone tie-dyed the original. All the levels are, as we've covered, it's very colourful, it's very striking. If this was NME in the early noughties, I'd say it was like playing the original on LSD, but we wouldn't know that because at NGB we're all good boys and girls. You start off in the lovely pastel pink environs of a little seaside town, and before you know it, you're in a forest, you're in a desert, you know how it is. And I feel like these environments aren't really places that skate games tend to dwell, so it's quite nice to have that little bit of variety. It opens up a bit more possibilities. For example, undead bees, they're in there. They're called zombies, obviously, that's great. And they live in the forest along with lots of wall riding. And you can boop the bees, so what's not to like? It's not just unusual environments, there's unusual moves as well that I've not seen in skate games before. So to keep combos going, obviously you've got your manuals, you've got your wall rides, but now you can do stair rides as well. That kind of comes down to timing. It's kind of like the landing thing from the original, where you tap a button to nail the landing, but it's on stairs. And I like these more environmental moves, like the wall rides and like the stair rides. They are kind of linear levels, but you have the option at some point to hit a button and change track onto what's known as a gnarly route, which is much harder. Also, hopefully that's the last time I have to say gnarly in this review, because I am 35. Tell you what isn't gnarly though, and that's the frame rate. For me, on my basic bitch TV, it is about 60 frames per second, and it never judges or anything. If you've got a nice TV, it can be 120 frames per second, and that's a lot of frames. It's got more frames than Specsavers, is what I'm saying. Which is lucky, because you're going to need some pinpoint timing if you're going to crack those later levels. Some later sections require you to hit every grind perfectly, otherwise you're not going to have the speed to clear some of the gaps that are going to come up. And this is where the game starts going from lovable, breezy, fun skate game to actually this is quite hard now, and someone somewhere is going to call it the Dark Souls of skating games. Maybe Park Souls? Because skate park? Park Souls? No, we'll come back to that. Basically, at the end, it's tougher than still trying to like Tony Hawk after he's done all the NFT nonsense. In summary, this is a gorgeous looking game that nails exactly what it sets out to do. It brings the OlliOlli series up to date, and it injects some real personality and accessibility into it. So it's a game that's both casual and engrossing at the same time. It's got a sweet difficulty curve, and it sets aside the genre's usual cliches to attract a demographic outside of former skaters with bad knees. And that's why I'm saying it's a 10 out of 10. I know, 10 out of 10. I kind of find the music a little bit underwhelming, but to be honest, you're not going to hear it anyway because you're going to be so focused in the zone and meditating on what you're doing. Thanks for listening to this rambling. Like and subscribe, all that stuff that Ben tells you to do. And cheers, bye.